I think we can get started. A very warm welcome to everyone who's joining this call, who's joining this live edition, this live webinar, which is number 2 in our series this week with Jacques, who is here with us, but he's keeping silent because he caught a bit of a cold. So he'll be answering a couple of questions in the chat, and he'll be there in the background in spirit and in virtual. We can see his camera feed, so that's all right. My name is Andras Panet, and today we're going to discuss AI for NGOs, which is a topic very close to my heart, both the AI part and both helping NGOs make a louder noise than their resources or their staff might allow. So with that, we have 45 minutes, and I would like to make the most out of it. Make sure that the audio and everything, the technical part, works well. There's a meeting ID there, which you can enter if you're following it in an app. But if there's any technical glitch, usually reloading, restarting the browser would do the trick. And you might ask whether the slides and recording will be shared. The recording, yes, and the shorter version of the slides, yes. So that is going to be available in a couple of days. We're going to make sure that everyone who's registered is there, but everyone on the live at the live version, you are more than welcome to ask questions in the chat box, and I'll do my best to answer it. And Jacques, on his part, will be able to type in a couple answers. So just to get your fingers warmed up and make sure that you're familiar with the interface, why don't you type in the chat box where you are joining us from? So we will see how geographically spread out you are, though Jacques himself is actually in the US, so perhaps he wins the game so far. But we have someone from London, from Brussels, from Brussels, Mirto, and Portugal. All right, very good. Different parts of Europe and our beloved Budapest as well, and certainly many other places. So with that, let's get started in respect of everyone's time. And I'll introduce Jacques and his work. And he is a well-known senior communications consultant and expert in Brussels and beyond. And Jacques has worked in consultancies, has worked with large clients, different international organizations, and private clients as well. And his work is just as integral part of what we're presenting today as it is mine. And my background is quite diverse, if I may say so. Some of you might know my work from EPSO competitions, EU competitions. I used to work at the institutions, and I'm also doing lots of trainings and workshops on strategic comms and advocacy topics. But with this project, with AI and advocacy and public affairs, we have quite many projects and many editions of our work, because we do workshops, we do different formats, webinars, and publications. So I encourage you to check out our newsletter, which we just launched. And we only put out one edition so far, but we're going to be doing that once a month, perhaps even more frequently. It's called AI for Influence. And if you're interested in workshops, you are more than welcome to get in touch for your teams, for your groups, that we can go much deeper than what time allows today. And you may want to follow us on LinkedIn, whether as influence builders or as individuals, Jacques and myself. But with that, there is the series, which I mentioned earlier. Some of you may have joined our edition yesterday, or maybe joining others as well. The aim is really to look at topics, to look at examples and use cases which are relevant to a particular audience. And you are with the NGO world, and that, of course, is a very broad and very diverse audience, dealing with larger and smaller initiatives and organizations. So we'd like to make sure that everything we say resonates with you. The first point in our housekeeping is to say what we're not going to talk about. And these are basically 4 areas that quickly I'll just mention for the sake of completeness. We are not going to discuss policy issues related to AI. This is not about the AI Act or other different policy initiatives that AI impacts. We're not going to talk about right here and right now about AI ethics. even though that's an extremely important topic. And here and there, I may touch upon that, but we're not going to have a dedicated session there, even though that's something that we will likely come back to as a panel discussion, as a workshop, as a webinar, focusing on the practical ethics related to AI applications. We're not going to look at now at the AI's impact on society and jobs, which again is an extremely important and very ambitious topic to look at. And finally, on a more practical level, we're not going to look at the differences and arguments for or against which AI tool, or more specifically, large language model, you should use or you could use, or what exactly the nuanced differences are between ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or any other. Why? Because we're looking at the methods and how you can make the most out of these tools in your daily work and in your NGOs or nonprofit organizations work. So we're not looking at the technical side of that, but the practical applicability. And by and large, the capabilities of these AI tools are very comparable. Now, again, I say AI tools. By that, I typically mean GPT-driven text input tools, but there are many others that you can use. And I'll briefly outline those differences and what are the different kind of approaches or use cases in respect of these tools. So with that, what's our mission in the next 40 or so minutes? Well, first and foremost, to spark your curiosity. And I'm absolutely sure that many of you have already experimented with ChatGPT and some other applications, and you have a certain understanding, and others may have more advanced understanding of what they might do. But I'd like you to be inspired to take that further, to keep experimenting and encourage a deliberate experimentation. And by that, we mean that you are more conscious as to what you want to achieve using these tools, and not just randomly playing around with words and applications, but inputting instructions, prompts with a more deliberate aim. And then ultimately to inspire your ambitions to explore that for your own organizations, and not just for your own personal benefits, but for a greater impact of your organization, whether it comes to advocacy, whether it comes to fundraising, whether it comes to working with your internal and external stakeholders. There are many ways that these tools, and especially the AI and ChatGPT, can increase your leverage. It can increase your impact to, I don't know, I'm not going to say number of 5-fold, 10-fold, 100-fold, but certainly in very ambitious ways. So a couple of points on best practices when using AI that I'd like to share with you. Now, many clients or organizations that we work with or do workshops with, they often are not aware that there are certain things you can by default do in ChatGPT and similar in other tools as well, where you can define certain personal customization that you provide custom instructions that will ultimately help you getting much more accurate, much more relevant results from that particular tool. So it's going to just simply by defining certain horizontal or general characteristics about yourself, about your preferences. So for instance, the one you see on the screen is Jacques' own description, his own instructions to ChatGPT, where he'd say, okay, I want you to respond with respect, politeness, professional tone at all times. And it could be informative, concise, and all the other instructions that you see on the screen. Also, you can define where you are based, for instance. So you could say, I'm representing a European NGO, or for me, the following values are fundamental. But you can go beyond that and say, in your responses, do not use flowery language. And that's a sentence that I put into my instructions where I say, I just can't stand those so obviously AI written responses that we so often see and land in our inbox or see on social media. it's very clearly generated by AIs. Now, you can generate very useful, helpful text with AI without that being so obvious to have been generated by AI. And part of it is you giving an instruction of what style or what approach or what wording AI is supposed to provide when giving you the answers. So a lot of that you can configure. Now, a common, very important question, of course, is my data safe? And that is a topic that we could go really far more deeply into, but enough to say at this point that you can just turn off that toggle bar to say improve the model for everyone, and you say no. Not because you don't feel solidarity with all the other users of ChatGPT, but because you're very careful about what your data is being used for. And when you turn that off, at least on a legal and technical level, there is a very clear commitment and promise from ChatGPT and similar and other tools is that they're not going to use your data to train the model. So that is an important safeguard. Now, there is a small caveat that if your data is super sensitive or it really has very sensitive personal information or other kind of sensitive information, exercise another layer of caution. You may want to sanitize your data before uploading anything into the tool. So maybe removing the most sensitive bits or doing other kind of cleaning of the data beforehand. But by and large, the right configuration gives you a certain amount of reassurance that your data is not going to train the algorithm any further. Now, I'd like to kick it off, the more substantive part of the presentation with this question. To encourage you, to ask you, put in the chat box, so what challenges have you faced when using AI or GPT in your work? And I do have some understanding of what kind of answers often come back to when we ask this question. But please type in the chat box and tell us a couple of points. What challenges have you faced, or what tough experience you had when trying out this tool? So let's see what sort of answers come back, and what challenges have you faced? I don't see any answer yet coming in, but yes, there we go. So lack of accuracy. So it could be very broad or outdated answers, ethical dilemmas, indeed, voice too formal or not too natural, too fake, or hallucinations or bias. So indeed, thank you for those inputs. And these are quite common comments and quite common frustrations. Now, a large part of these, I wouldn't say everything, but a large part of these can be massively improved, mitigated by the right techniques and the right approach, and some of which I'm going to share with you today, because this is not a given. It's not that a tool that GPT must be so hallucinating, that it must be so biased, that it must be so writing in such an unnatural way. There are ways that it can be far, far better with the right approach. And we would often say that silly metaphor where you compare that to a wild animal, like a beast that you need to tame. And you need to tame that with the right methods, though in this case, often with the right prompts, with the right instructions. So there is this philosophical question, but it does have a practical repercussion to say, is GPT a solution in search of a problem? No, because once you know what you want to use it for and how, it's going to be an extremely powerful, helpful assistant or helper or amplifier, multiplier of your work. So a couple of points there that I'd like to share with you as to, and this is my brainchild, as to how I see the use of AI. What are the different levels, different ways? And on a very basic level, I think most people by now have tried to give it some funny prompts and some funny games. You can input the European Commissioner designates mission letter and have GPT turn that into a Shakespearean verse. Very cool, but not very helpful. Or at one point, I did that just as a silly experiment to take some industry press release and say, okay, turn that into a love letter to Ursula von der Leyen. Now, again, it might trigger some smile on some faces, but it's not practically very helpful or applicable. But then the next step would be proofreading, summarization. So something that you already do, and it does faster, and if properly configured, better. So it's the existing, what you do, but it can do very quickly and quite reliably. But the next bit would be optimization of your workflow. So you can have it draft emails, you can have input certain data, and it analyzes it for you. So there are a couple of examples that we've come up for issues that NGOs often face, and that work that NGOs and nonprofits often are confronted with. And you say, okay, maybe this is something that I would have asked an expert, or I had to pay big money for that, or just have complex systems do that sort of work. Now you are able to leverage the power of GPT. And the next level would be brainstorming, cross-referencing. So that's when you collate different layers of mental models, of thinking frameworks, analytical frameworks. You feed in data, and just with the power of words through your instructions, it's going to give you a much more in-depth analysis. So again, we're going to have a couple examples to make that more practical. And then the kind of the crown jewel in this series is looking at specialized tools. And those specialized tools are often off-the-shelf tools. So you go on a website, you pay a subscription fee, occasionally it's free, but something that is a dedicated app to do a certain task. This would typically be you input a European parliamentary hearing audio, and then it not only does a transcription, but it tells you how that matters for your particular organization. Let's say I'm an environmental NGO. How does that hearing have an impact on our line of business? And custom chatbots would be typically that, where you create certain data sets and use that for your organization. And I have some examples coming up in that regard. So the first example there is simply, this is just, I was playing with and I did a screenshot to demonstrate how easy it is to create your NGO's custom GPT. And custom GPT is basically something that is unique to you with unique personalized instructions that you give, and you can feed in background data. So what I did here, this is as part of GPT. Perhaps it requires the paid version, which is now roughly $20 a month, so quite an affordable fee. And I said, okay, build me a GPT that helps European NGO, and you can be much more specific as to we are an environmental NGO, we are a human rights NGO, we are any other. Apply for grants in the most helpful way. So I say there, but you could say our annual report, scientific studies, policy priorities, cross-reference these with a call for applications requirements. So basically, you create a little engine of sorts where you say, here is who we are. And that's typically fully public information because it's on your about page, it's on your annual report. These are fully available documents. And say, okay, learn who we are, understand what our priorities are, where our focus is, and then help me do my job better when it comes to a grant application. So you can feed that particular application in and say, okay, help me analyze that better. So we're no longer looking at just simply providing a summary or an outline or a draft of something, but to say, okay, do that much more qualitative analytical work so I can think about it and I can do my job quicker and more effectively. And then there is a notebook where, which is, it's not called Notebook LM, this is Google's tool where you can provide, again, this is a free tool, you can provide more background documents and you can have interactions with those documents. So it's a very powerful tool because even large documents can be fed in. So whether that's a commission report, whether that's your own organization's background information, and you can retrieve information in a much more interactive way. I wanted to showcase something that I'm working on, and this is a prototype of a tool which is for message testing. So most of us in the European, in the advocacy space, you have certain messages that you're putting out for campaigns, for other purposes, to persuade policymakers, members of parliament. And we created virtual personas, which are kind of look-alike of individuals, not actual individuals, but in types of individuals with their political ideas, with their worldview, and to say, if I have a certain organization and a certain message or a position paper, I'm curious how that person would react. And that person would then say, okay, well, Claire Dubois, which is a name we made up, though presumably there might be somewhere out there, but again, a made up name for that particular character, and to say, okay, what would she, who may have that kind of political views, that kind of demographic attributes, and the AI sort of simulates it and gives me helpful feedback for my political or policy or campaign message. Here's the next question before we go to the next bit is to ask you, so what challenge do you think AI could help you solve? So what is it that you would expect, you would like the AI to help you solve as a policy challenge or as a management challenge, managing your organization or other? So please type that into the chat box. Where would you see its greatest potential? And you may not know how it would do it, but you have that aspiration to say, okay, I'd love AI to help me with this, or I believe it could have the capabilities to help me with that. So please put that in the chat box while I'll take a sip of water. And then on we go for a couple of practical examples and case studies. So drafting project proposals. All right, very good. What else? All right, uploading content to your website. Okay, hopefully the uploading itself is not that labor intensive, but I guess creating it and drafting that, bringing new perspectives, creating challenging public affairs strategies. So all of these are absolutely possible with some tweaking. Some may be more technical, others may be less. But again, we're not talking about coding and programming challenges. It's more about understanding the mindset, the way you formulate your instructions. So let me give you a couple examples, and some really resonate with the ones that you mentioned in the chat box, which I hope will be helpful to you. So the first one would be to personalize materials, communications material for advocacy campaigns, and there, one of you mentioned, so grant proposals and impact stories. And simply by giving a well thought out prompt, largely this is possible. So you'd say, draft a personalized grant proposal using the attached project outline. Let me pause here for a second. So attaching the project outline is an extremely important part of an instruction of this kind, because GPT is very smart, but it's often very ignorant. Ignorant because it relies on the large data set that it has access to. But as soon as you make it your own and you provide that kind of project outline, it's going to give you far more relevant results. So to say, highlighting our NGOs' impact on youth education, or replace that with your own situation. And then you give an extra instruction, say, make sure to focus on how our programs directly address each of the key points in the project outline. So we are basically putting these two together and instructing GPT to look at them both at the same time. Many people, when they do similar prompts, they would omit, they would forget to give those very directed or very focused instructions. And then the results, obviously, are just going to be too generic. Another example, to analyze large data set. or you can extract insights for advocacy and fundraising. And those data sets could be Eurostat, and those data sets could be your own specific data. So let's say if you are BirdLife and your number one priority is protecting the bird habitat in Europe, you will likely have access to a lot of research, a lot of data, which is something you can feed into it and say, analyze the data set from our last year's fundraising activities or from last year's research that we have access to. And you provide spreadsheet and say, provide me insights on the most successful campaigns, donor demographics, trends to help organize next year's strategy, right? So it's not just analyzing what there is, but looking at its potential of how we can use that for the future for the following priorities, right? So that is a different way of looking at things, because it's not just crunching data, but doing that with a specific purpose in mind. So what I'm trying to pass as a message here is changing, switching the mindset of what you can do with it, because so far we've never had a tool like this, which was so powerful that we could ask from it an analysis or analytics or questions that normally, I mean, it's been humans who've been able to do that until now with our analytical capabilities. And a large part of that, at least on a draft level, and we're not expecting perfect 100% final results, but at least as a draft, as a concept, it can provide that. Third one, automate meeting summaries, task assignments, project update. This is a lot about workflow, but on a very immediate basic level, I just want to recommend this particular tool, even though there are many other similar tools like this, but Fathom is the one I always use now in every meeting that I have. It's a note taker, and it's more than just note taking. It's actually extracting all the takeaways, the action points, and everything that I need to be aware of after a meeting. So this is an optimization tool, but super handy. Next bit, identifying grant opportunities, funders, maybe by scanning databases, news updates. And at this point, it could be a prompt. So you say, scan the following websites and say, identify 3 new grant opportunities that align with our mission to support, and in this example, environmental sustainability. Include deadlines, application requirements, potential funding. So you act a little bit in a way that you give an instruction as if you would give your robot helper or your very eager intern, but it's not necessarily capable of doing all of that if we're talking about many websites, or technically those websites are not built in a way that they are immediately readable by ChatGPT. But there are many other tools out there, hence those keywords, monitoring tools, scraping tools, parsing tools. These are basically, again, you can find web apps. So and I'm happy to recommend if you have a specific use case in mind, but these are typically, you sign up, and that's what they do. These are readily available online services. Some are free, some are paid. When you say, okay, I need automatic monitoring of the following websites, whenever they change or whenever they come up with some news updates that relate to bird protection in Europe, then send me an alert and I'm going to be aware of that. So there are these automated tools which are now not only looking at keywords, but they are also looking at the meaning, the substantive part that you can now analyze using GPT and the power of GPT that is built into these services to help your workflow to be much more effective in your work. The next one is to say monitoring global and local trends in your NGOs focus area. And I wanted to give you this 2-step approach. So the first one is a tool, some of you may be very familiar, others may not, be with a tool called Perplexity AI, and that's a bit like Google. It's a search engine, or it's becoming more and more search engine. Basically, you put in your query and it retrieves information from multiple sources and gives you the collated result. So if you say, what are the most important global policy changes and European news updates on climate change mitigation efforts in 2024? Now, again, for the sake of example, you adapt it to your particular case and say, this is going to give you already a very good input from multiple sources. So when it comes to information retrieval, some of you mentioned earlier that it's not up to date when you put something into GPT, or it gives you inaccurate information. So a tool like Perplexity, and I'm pretty sure that Google is also offering or soon going to be offering very similar ways of not just searching information, but retrieving information. This is very helpful for that. And then comes the ChatGPT bit where you say, okay, provide a brief report on these trends that could impact our, and you say NGOs project for the 2025 advocacy campaign, right? So the baseline, the background information, you're not relying on GPT to get. You say, because GPT, it's not where its power really is retrieving information. GPT is not very good at that. But other tools, Perplexity, or you can research it yourself, turn that into a PDF, put it into ChatGPT, and then give that instruction that will help you achieve what you want to achieve. And then finally, translating reports, newsletter, and more content into multiple languages, where I want to share with you this example where you say, okay, translate our quarterly impact report, and you attach it into French and Spanish, ensure that the tone remains professional, formatting is maintained. That's on the format, the output side. And you could even upload a sample document and say, okay, replicate that and create the output as a Word file. And then you can download that Word file. So you don't need to rely on all the chat and the text that's inside the ChatGPT interface. It can generate you a Word file. It can generate you an Excel file. But one point that I'd like to emphasize here, that's the last bit, that I had the inspiration and I said, okay, I need to put that in and share that with you, because it gives a very different kind of instruction than the previous ones. We say, okay, suggest 3 culturally adapted changes to the original document to make it resonate better with our local readers, right? So that's a kind of instruction that is probably not obvious, and it may not occur to you if you're very used to the summarization, the extract, the translation way of working, and say, actually, I could localize it. I could make it resonate better with them simply by giving an instruction where you say, okay, tweak a little bit that content and make it more unique to that particular audience. And that's a very powerful thing, because if you're writing an advocacy message to a member of the European Parliament and say, okay, how can I make this message resonate better with that particular person, given that person's background, interests, and stance on a certain issue that's important to us. Another point, and I said, okay, let's add one more, because I think this is helpful and practical for all of the listeners here. So I spoke with my friend Doro, who runs EU Matrix. And EU Matrix, they do monitoring of the Parliament and the Council, voting patterns, and they are excellent when it comes to data analytics and statistics for EU public affairs. And this is from one of their reports where they collated information on members, the new members of the European Parliament, and also partly about the European Commissioner designates. So I gave an instruction to ChatGPT saying, here's the source, that particular web page. Now, it couldn't immediately read the web page. I simply turned that web page into a PDF and fed that into ChatGPT. So that was much easier as a data input. And I said, okay, carefully analyze the graphs here. And beyond the most obvious conclusions, what other insights can you detect from one or the combination of multiple ones that would be relevant for a European NGO? So the prompt itself, the question itself, is not that straightforward, because what I'm looking for is to see beyond the obvious. maybe there are some correlations, some interesting insights. And I'm not claiming that these are extremely unique or extremely shocking insights that it came up with, but based on the data I fed it, it said, okay, there are shifts in committee leadership. Look at which political groups gained chairmanships or influential roles, and that you can target. Fine, fair enough. But to say, okay, look at proportion of the pro-EU versus Eurosceptic parties, and that gives me a certain idea. Or cross-party influence, cross-committee influence, how can that help your work? So you can draw certain conclusions, which maybe 3 out of 4 you immediately thought about, but maybe there's one that you did not. And that's exactly where this chart and the whole concept comes from, where GPT don't expect that it's going to take you 100% to the solution. That 20% is you, your background, your knowledge, your understanding, your professional expertise, all of that is there. It can take you very far, and don't expect it to take you all the way, and both will be very, very synergetic in your work. So there's one question, and it keeps coming up, and some of you mentioned in the chat box also that we're all worried about hallucinations in the system, where it comes up with information that is just simply not there, that does not exist. It makes it up, and often poor results are the results. So that there are outputs which are not helpful. So to avoid that, or to absolutely minimize that, there are a couple of things you can do. One is really paying a lot of attention to the data that you put into the prompt, the instructions, the background information. It's massively going to increase the quality of the output. The next one, you can simply instruct ChatGPT and say, browse the web, or look up the following information, and then it's going to actively do that sort of search, because otherwise it may not have, and I say that in air quotes, the realization that it's supposed to go online and start searching for the most up-to-date information. You can also create a knowledge base based on data input, your Excel sheets, your PDFs. It just likes PDFs a lot. Probably the way it's structured in a technical sense, it's easier for a machine to read it. So you can absolutely input that, and not just one, but you can do multiple PDFs at the same time. And the last one is just the most practical bit. When you ask GPT to say, here's a background document, here's a PDF, here's a study from the European Food Safety Authority on whatever scientific matter it is. Analyze that and tell us where are the relevant points for our NGO. Make sure that you always quote the page number or the line where that particular issue appears. So you can cross-check it, and you can be sure that it's not making up things which otherwise would get you into trouble if you quoted that. And then final points, or a couple of final points before we close off, is do not be afraid of using it. I encourage others to use it. And there's this saying, AI will not replace your job, but someone using AI will. So it's a good investment of your professional development and time. Do not use it as Google, like I said earlier, because it's not that good at retrieving up-to-date information. And do not trust it fully. Trust but verify. Make sure that you cross-check what it puts out. So the main point is really about asking better questions. The way you formulate your questions, or requests, if you will have a massive impact on the quality of the responses. And as I said before, so it's really eager to please you. So if you give a very brief prompt, a very brief question, it's going to answer you, but probably not very accurately and not very well. So it wants to please you, so it's not going to ask back questions. Oh, what do you mean by that? Let's say, give me ideas for a birthday party. And it's not going to ask you, oh, is it for your child, your granddad, or yourself? Or is it in Europe, or it's in Asia? Or is it in the summer or in winter? Or is it for 5 people or 200? Right? It's immediately going to give you an answer, but you're not going to feel it's relevant. It's smart because it's very capable and powerful engine, but it's ignorant because it doesn't know you or doesn't know the particular circumstances of your query. So provide that information through your words or through data input. And by using different prompting techniques, and again, we'll have that in the handouts, that sort of approach where you can take a closer look of what makes a good prompt. But of course, there are ample resources online. You can look it up and to say, okay, how can I make a better prompt? Whether it's about giving it a role, saying, who are you in that particular situation? Or impersonating, saying, okay, write like in the tone of somebody, or use the vocabulary of a data scientist or a European Commission official. Meta prompting is a great tool to say, okay, help me craft a good prompt to achieve a certain goal, because I don't know what I don't know. Or to say, ask me 3 questions to make a better query to you afterwards. And you can also give the negative point, saying, don't answer in that way. So for when I said, don't use flowery language, don't use too many adjectives, or do use bullet points in your output or in the formatting. So instead of saying, for instance, give me ideas for an AI webinar for NGOs, that is not a very good prompt, or would not have been a very good prompt in our preparation for this particular webinar. But this was actually a pretty helpful one when I gave ChatGPT, and some of the ideas that came from this were built into this very webinar. So now the loop is completely an infinite loop in the way we present this, right? So I'm running a short webinar for NGO managers, lobbyists, how to use what to use AI for their work, or advocacy professionals. Give me 10 specific, actionable, directly usable ideas. And these are the 4 main challenges, use cases, objectives of the participants as I understand it. And do it in a tabulated format. That means it's going to give me a table and it's easier to work with. So we have 3 minutes left, and I'm happy that we are in time. I'm looking at the questions that may have come in, but I can see that Jacques has been very diligently answering many of these. So that is very helpful. So this is just to let you know that we're available for workshops and available for speaking engagement and consultancy if we can help your organization take it to the next level, or help go much deeper in all of this with your teams. So feel free to let us know. And certainly check out on Influence Builders. We have various resources, and not just the webinars and the recordings, but other resources. And do check out the newsletter that we have launched, and we'll be more active publishing there insights, news, and ideas on AI for influence and AI for public affairs, for EU affairs, for advocacy at large. So with that, we have about a minute left. So please, if you have questions, let us know, or put that in the chat box right now. I'll be very happy to answer those to the degree that's possible in the short time available. But if those questions come to you afterwards and you think of those afterwards, we're very happy to be in touch, to share the knowledge. And everything that we are experimenting with, we typically put that on LinkedIn and share those insights and experiments. There are many different directions we are looking at, but really the ultimate goal is to harness the technology, harness all of this without being too geeky, too technical, but something that is accessible for you personally, individually, and also for you as a team, that you wouldn't need to hire technical experts or others. That could be a way if you're looking at workflows and custom applications, but in your daily work, this can give you a lot of benefits and really get you to the next level when it comes to advocacy and NGO activism. So I trust this was helpful, and please let us know, share it with others, and we are available. And tomorrow we are coming back with another part in the series for EU officials, and there will be for consultancies, for even for MEPs and their assistants and others. So thank you so much for your attention. Really appreciate that you've showed up in such large numbers. And It's a pity Jacques couldn't make his voice heard today, but he was with us and is with us, and his work is definitely a big part of everything that I presented to you. So thanks for being here, and hopefully we can continue the conversation. And a big thanks to Raquel, who was also there as a technical help in the background. Hope to see you around.